Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us wherever you are. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org. Most of you are not in Santa Barbara, but for those that are, you can watch us on TV Santa Barbara here in town. On goodlifetelevision.org, you can always find the full interviews, these wonderful, interesting stories we've been having over the last couple of years. But you can also find what we call power clips, which is kind of we break up those interviews into some of these great moments. We also push those out on social media, all the social media platforms. So we're glad you're here. We're talking about the good stuff. And I have a longtime friend with me today. I'm so glad to have Bart Tarman is with me. Well, I was just telling Bart, reminding him, we met 28 years ago. I was a senior in high school, and then I ended up coming to Westmont College, where Bart was the chaplain for many years. And so we've known each other a long time, so it's a long-time friend. Welcome.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
I was thinking this morning, where do I start with Bart Tarman? It's really an honor. Bart's an ordained presbyterian. I should introduce him a little bit. He is an ordained Presbyterian minister. He's the pastor of Summerlin Church here near where we're sitting in Santa Barbara, California. Like I said, he was the chaplain at Westmont. He's been married to Linda for over 50 years. They live in Santa Barbara, California. And recently, Bart's gotten into painting. He's an artist. He's acrylic, watercolor, other forms of the water media. So we'll talk a little bit about that. You and President Bush got into painting at the same time.
That is kind of odd. Yeah, I've got all his books too.
Yeah, and he's really serious about it.
He's very good.
Yeah.
He's very good.
It's amazing.
Yeah. He's taking it very seriously. It's
yeah,
obvious.
Really, yeah. Start with where you came from. You're from Colorado, and I remember you talking about that you were an atheist early on in life. But talk a little bit about kind of your upbringing.
Okay, well, I was actually raised in the Midwest, but moved to Colorado when I went to the University of Denver.
Okay.
And yeah, I had a wonderful family, very loving. I'm so blessed. Both my parents are gone now. But I had a pretty idyllic childhood. They believed in me. They stayed married their whole lives. It was a pretty stable, growing up time. And we went to church every Sunday. It was kind of a hodgepodge of Protestant churches, Methodist, Congregational, Presbyterian. And I just got bored with it all. And in my teenage years, a teacher of mine who was an atheist, really great teacher, probably the best teacher in the whole school, kind of influenced me, but it wasn't like he was trying to. It just did. And I thought, I just don't buy any of this stuff. So I threw it all out. It was just kind of the way I do things. It's kind of all or nothing a little bit. And so I did become a really committed atheist at 17. I mean, what the heck do you know at 17?
Right.
But I thought I knew everything, and in that everything I knew there was no God. And so, but I found myself, it's not a happy place to be.
Right.
It doesn't make you feel really good.
Right.
And through some various interchanges with fellow students who had come to faith in Christ, I came to an experience that I did not expect. It came out of the blue for me. I was all alone. Nobody knew about it. I wasn't at some big meeting or a come to Jesus kind of thing. I was in my home alone, and I decided to pick up the Bible. And I picked up the Bible, and I don't think I'd read it since I was a little kid, other than hearing it in church. And you know how in the back of some Bibles it goes, if you're sad, look up page 12 or something.
Right.
Well, I looked up something. I have no idea what it was. And I read it, and I just started to weep. And I just felt the love of God invade my life. And I knew it had to do with Jesus. I don't know how I knew that. I kind of wish I knew what verse I'd read. I really don't. And but it was, I would now describe it as a mystical experience, unsought. I didn't ask for it, look for it. I wasn't on a big search that I know of. And it changed the trajectory of my life.
Wow.
I've never felt the presence of God leave in all these years since. I was 17, I'm 72 now, so all those years. I've left God, I've struggled, I've fallen off the way, all those things. But I never felt like God was not there for me, even in my darkest moments. And I realize some people do experience that, so I'm not even saying that's normative. I'm just saying that's my experience so far.
Right, right.
And if people feel God's left, that's different than God actually having left. I don't believe God leaves anybody anytime.
Yeah. You've been married a long time.
I'll say, yeah, I say I've been married to 4 different women, but they're all the same person.
Talk about that, your journey with Linda, who, by the way, is a wonderful person. We're
sure
going to
is.
have her on someday.
She sure is. Well, 51 years, yeah. Well, forgiveness is the key. And then the second key is forgiveness, and the third key is forgiveness. And she's forgiven a lot, and we've worked hard. We have a wonderful marriage, but it's been a difficult one at many moments. We're both very strong people, so we're not the married couple that is just always going great, and they go to church and carry their Bibles, and they go home happy with each other. In fact, I'll tell you a funny thing. When I was preaching at El Montecito in my younger years, we had 3 kids, and I finally just said, I can't drive to church with you guys because we get in these big fights on the way to church, and I'd be preaching, and I'd be all frazzled. So I go, I'm taking another car, I mean, we have a very real life, but we've worked hard at our marriage, and we still work hard at it, actually. It's not like it's all, roses all the time. It just isn't. We're strong, we clash, we love each other, we're learning to communicate after 51 years. We've learned more and more and more and more. 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. But I tell you what, the benefits of hanging in there, and not everybody can, so this is not a guilt trip on anybody who's gone through a divorce at all. But if you can hang in there, the blessings are pretty incredible. Yeah, and she is a wonderful person. She's a spiritual director, has a deep contemplative life, and helps a lot of people, including me.
And do you still feel like you're getting to know her?
Oh, totally.
At 51 years.
Yeah. I can't remember who said this. It was some famous author that said something like, he loved her so much but he understood her so little. I mean, I think that's true with anybody. If you get to know them in their depths, God created us. So that means there's depth inside every human being. And we're all on a journey. So I wasn't only joking when I said I've been married to 4 different women, the same person. She's been married to 4 or 5 different men. It's all been me, thank heavens. But I've changed. I've grown. And frankly, I feel like I'm growing more now than ever. Changing, expanding, learning, being embarrassed by my own flaws and character traits that still need a lot of work.
Yeah. It's, being known is such a powerful thing.
Totally.
And I mean, after 51 years, we're at 24. We're not even halfway home.
That's great. Way to go.
Thank you. Yeah. And it's an interesting freedom that comes with being known.
Yep.
I mean, I think in that sense, it's almost a little glimpse of the God relationship.
Absolutely.
Where if you have a human being where you're fully known and fully loved, you're tasting a little bit of heaven, aren't you?
Absolutely. And that's actually what every human being on the earth is supposed to be doing for every other human being. We're supposed to be knowing and loving. Because you can't grow unless you have a safe environment to grow. And the only true safe environment is what you just said, when somebody knows you and accepts you.
Yeah.
Accepts you. That doesn't mean they like everything about you. Okay.
Right.
But they accept you, and there's time to work on some stuff.
That's so beautiful.
Where I think the concept of journey is the thing that's hit me the most in the last decade. That every human being is on a journey, and if you knew everything about them, their journey would make sense. Some of the craziness you see and some of the joy that you see, it would all make sense if you understood. And they don't even understand it. We're trying to figure out our own journey. And the saddest thing in the world would be a person who gets to the end of their life on earth and never really showed up in their own journey. They were always trying to be somebody else, or live up to some unmet expectation from their childhood. What would it be like to get to the end of your life and realize you never showed up in it?
Right. Right.
And we help each other show up in our own journey with love and acceptance. That doesn't mean acquiescence, because we're meant to speak the truth in love to each other also.
We have a special needs child, a brain injured child, and so we've been going to this institute, about this for now 17 years. And I remember when I was learning about the brain, I was learning about injury to the brain, and something clicked for me, because you see these brain injured kids, whether autistic or whatever, autistic kids, who are banging their head literally sometimes against the wall. Yeah. And then we learned at the institutes, well, it's because their hearing is so sensitive that they can hear a TV when it's off, they're just in a different, and then the kids that drool because they don't have any feeling, let's say. And it made sense to me because we would ask the question, why do they act like that?
Yeah.
Because they're injured.
Absolutely.
Isn't that
absolutely? They're not bad.
Right.
They're injured. And
they're injured. People
who are acting out in, unhelpful ways, self-destructive ways, hurting others, down deep they're injured. I was just thinking about this morning. It's interesting you bring it up.
Isn't that an interesting thought?
It's hard to see. Somebody said to me, it's hard to have compassion on an angry person.
Right. Yes.
But underneath that anger, there's hurt, I guarantee you.
Yeah.
There's woundedness, injury. I like your word, injury. And actually, the brain science is now telling us that emotional injuries actually get wired into our brain, into patterns, neural pathways.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to back up. You've talked about Jesus to me and other people, I think, more than any other person that I know. Jesus has kind of been your topic for about 30 years.
It's a pretty good topic. I mean, you got to admit, if you're going to pick one.
Right. It's worked well.
It's worked well.
Yeah.
It's a good gig.
Right. So I was thinking about this last night. So our solar system in the Milky Way galaxy is 287 billion kilometers in diameter. There are 100 billion solar systems in the Milky Way galaxy.
That's amazing.
And then there are millions of other galaxies. Okay, so let's just set the stage for where we are.
Okay, let's bring it right down to the studio.
Right. So here we are. In that context, the God who spun the galaxies into existence. And you and I believe that he came in bodily form, and his name was Jesus. And I saw in your sermon you said you quoted that verse, the visible expression of the invisible God. What was Jesus like?
That's like great. How many hours do
we have? Plenty
I've spent my whole life talking about this. Well, first of all, if you don't like God or you don't believe in God, my guess is the God you don't believe in doesn't exist anyway.
You don't believe in me
So if
either.
you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, my guess is the God you don't believe in doesn't exist anyway, so you're in good shape. However, there may be a God that you don't know about who does exist, and if you knew that God, you would be thrilled. You would be so happy. That God is a lot like Jesus. In fact, there's a theologian who said, if God isn't like Jesus, he ought to be. And so, yes, I do believe that Jesus was the incarnation of God. The theological formula is fully God and fully human. We're scratching the surface. We're talking about God here. I mean, so all of our theology, I've got a degree in systematic theology. It's kind of a joke in a way. You have a systematic, theology means the study of God. You're going to put God into a system. So I mean, it's really, come on, we're guessing. We're kids guessing in this universe you just described. But what if that God came to earth in some form? That God could have come as a woman. That God could have come in 21st century America. But that God chose to come as Jesus of Nazareth. His last name wasn't Christ. That's a title that he lived into. And so, at least if you want to take a look at it, you would say, if I look at the person of Jesus, and there's 4 historic books that are universally accepted. There are others that are less universally accepted, but there's 4, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They tell the story of Jesus. Mark, you can listen to it on audio in about a half an hour. I mean, these are not like, 300-page books. I would encourage anybody, just listen to the story of Jesus. Give it just enough credibility that somebody wrote this down who either knew him or knew somebody who knew him, and give it enough credibility to listen to it and say, do I like this guy? I mean, it's something that basic. I mean, if he walked in, would this be the kind of person I would enjoy being with? And the first thing you'll notice about the life of Jesus is religious people didn't like him that much. And the folks that had been booted out by religion flocked to him. Now, why is that? He was not, right now we have a portion of the Christian population that are very judgmental, mean-spirited, exclusivistic. I'm just telling you, they're not Christ-like. Because Jesus was not exclusivistic. He got in trouble for being way too inclusive. He invited everybody in. He told parables where they basically were, I want everybody at this banquet. Go get some more. Right. I want it full. The people who were excluded by the religious system of their day, or by a portion of that religious system, I should say, they found in Jesus a person of joy. And just the other day, I was reading a scholarly work on the life of Jesus, and this scholar said, one of the greatest characteristics of Jesus, I'd never thought of this, but it's true. She said, her name is Beatrice Bruteau, she said, is that he was relaxed. He was relaxed. So I've gone back through some of the pages going, is he really relaxed? It's pretty right on. You don't ever see Jesus like jogging to the next miracle. Hurry up, we got to get this in, He just kind of living his life. He didn't have front men. He didn't have a big program. He didn't have brochures. He lived his life in such a way that love flowed out everywhere. It was just, you'd get near Jesus and love would drench you. And you'd want more, or it'd be too threatening and you'd run away. And he was a very threatening person in the sense of he threatened the status quo. He threatened the religious police of his day. They didn't like him that much. Well, they along with the political power, which was the Romans, put him to death because he was a threat. Love is always a threat to the status quo, actually. So people who want to be all about social justice, follow Jesus. He was social justice in action every step of the way. People who want to be about a more interior contemplative life, follow Jesus. He was a contemplative. He was a mystic. People who want to be prophetic in their culture, follow Jesus. He was literally a prophet. I mean, a literal prophet. I believe he was more than all those things. But start with him anywhere. It doesn't really matter. Start with him as a good man.
Yeah.
But just learn about him. I think I became mesmerized. And, at least in my view and my experience, is he's more than a historical figure. His spirit, we call it the Holy Spirit, is still around. And you better watch out if you're an atheist, because like my friends in the African American church don't call it the Holy Spirit, they call it the Holy Ghost. Ghosts are kind of scary, and they'll jump out of a bush right here, when you're not least thinking of it. Well, I believe the spirit of the animated Jesus, this Holy Ghost, this Holy Spirit, is alive and well. It's, I think, what I experienced when I was 17. And it can change the trajectory of a life, but that doesn't mean you all of a sudden become a saint or something.
Right.
Even
Jesus grew.
Jesus grew. People don't know that, especially religious people. They think he was just kind of in saran wrap,
Right. Right.
And it says he grew in wisdom, in knowledge, in favor with the people. Yeah, he grew. I think he grew in his own self-understanding as well.
And so he was love. So there's love walking around.
Exactly.
And yet not everybody liked him.
Exactly.
He sent some people way off the rails.
Totally.
Which is interesting. Because sometimes I think about the what is it in the Presbyterian Sunday school where you stick the things on the
flannel graph?
Right.
Love those babies.
I thought, if I looked at Jesus, I would think, well, everybody liked him.
No.
But really, everybody didn't like him.
No, not at all.
I mean, he was disruptive, I guess. And
Love is always disruptive. Like when I met Linda and fell in love with her, it disrupted my life. You know, I got kids and
you disrupted
grandkids,
hers.
and I disrupted hers probably more than she disrupted mine. But yeah, there's a reason they say fell head over heels. You know, I mean, love demands a choice. So when you bump up, I love this. This is an insight from another author. He was talking about religious art, medieval religious art, and you remember those pictures of Jesus, and his heart is outside of his body.
Oh,
They
right.
call him the Sacred Heart of
Yeah.
Jesus, and it's got little rays of light coming out of it, you know. And this person said, you know, it's really bad art, let's face it, but it's great theology, because it says when you get close to Jesus, the first thing you're going to bump into is his heart. And it's a heart of warmth and acceptance and love for you. Great theology. And it was those paintings were done for a pre-literate society, so it was like reading a book to the people who couldn't read. They go, "Oh, I get it. His heart is right there for me."
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you ever picture like him as a man, like if he was here today, what he would be like? Just if you saw him. This is a weird question.
No, it's a good question. You know, we have no physical depiction of Jesus. So we don't actually know what he looked like. So most of the pictures we have are like, he looks like he's a European.
Right,
know?
right.
Well, he was Middle Eastern, so he's probably darker skin. He was probably short, which makes me feel good because I'm short. You know, he would have had, you know, like a Middle Easterner. He was from Israel. He was a Jewish man his entire life. He never left Judaism. I don't even believe he tried to start another religion. I think he was reforming his own tradition, and it grew into something else. But I think we wouldn't I think
You wouldn't
he could be
recognize him.
walking around right here. He could be one of these camera men or women, you know. I don't think there was anything in his physical appearance that drew people. I think the very fact that we have no description of him is kind of interesting.
It is
I mean,
interesting.
antiquity didn't tend to do that, but yeah, I think it could be an ordinary person.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think Jesus manifests himself through every ordinary person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether they know it or not, actually.
I wish he was a redhead.
He might have been, you know.
I kind of doubt it.
It could be.
That's interesting. And he spoke. When I think about him, if he was here, he was a person who's gentle, but he spoke with authority.
Totally.
But that's
Absolutely.
really interesting about the relaxed thing, because you think about it, he must have been pretty comfortable in his own skin.
He was he never apologized for anything. That's another odd thing. You think, hey, he's the Son of God, he ought to be humble. Well, if you're the Son of God, being humble means being truthful. So he lived his life in a way that there was no need to apologize. Here's another thing. He did not hate himself. There was no self-hatred in Jesus. We all carry self-hatred. A friend of mine who you've met, Brennan Manning, the late Brennan Manning, wrote a book about Jesus, and the subtitle was Stranger to Self-Hatred. So if you're going to follow Jesus, you can't keep going on hating yourself, because he's going to say, knock it off.
Enough
I
already.
love you enough already.
Yeah.
You're actually a beautiful creation of God. You just don't quite realize it yet, you know, which is what sin is. Sin isn't doing a bunch of bad things. I suppose it eventuates in that at times, but I think sin is forgetting who we truly are, that we're truly the beloved of God, every human being on earth. Brain injured, nuclear scientist, saint, sinner, every person is created in the image of God, and we've forgotten that. Actually, that was the big problem in the Garden of Eden, in the epic story, the archetypal story of the Garden of Eden. The devil said, did God say that? You know,
Right.
really, but if you would eat this thing, then you would become like God. They were already like God. They were already like God. So I think the original sin was forgetfulness. They forgot who they truly were, and this long journey that Jesus came to initiate is helping us remember get over our amnesia and realize we're actually children of the all-loving God who created all those galaxies. That's who we truly are. And I think this life's journey, it's a slow torturous journey at times.
Right.
You know Father Boyle because you interviewed
Yeah.
him here. He's got a chapter in his book, Tattoos on the Heart. And if for your audience, if they haven't read Tattoos on the Heart, just forget everything I'm saying. Go read that book. I mean, it's phenomenal. But he has a chapter in it called The Slow Work of God. That is just tremendous about how God's not in a hurry to bring us to sainthood or whatever you want to call it. He takes us where we are, she takes us where we are, the divine takes us where we are, whatever word you want to use. Because God is much bigger than he or she or even our concept of being. We'll never fully understand God.
And as the great Brendan Manning said, he loves us as we are and not as we should be.
It's my favorite line from Brendan Manning.
Yeah.
I use it all the time. I don't even quote him every time because I say it so often. I mean, think about that. Your love, so your audience right now, whoever's listening to this, is loved as they are,
Yeah.
not as they should be. Now, if you're loved as you are, you'll become more what you should be.
Right.
And
Right.
until you're loved as you are, you will not become more what you should be.
So
Or what
receiving-
you're invited to
be.
come into, I
Yeah,
would put
right.
it that way, yeah.
So receiving that love
Absolutely.
is a big deal.
It's the deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just a big deal. It's the
Yeah.
deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To know that another great book is by Henri Nouwen, or Henry Nouwen, as some people say it, called, I think it's called The Life of the Beloved. It's a beautiful, beautiful book about what we're just talking about.
Yeah, I saw in your sermon you were talking about the only necessary thing, which is one of my favorites. It's always, I've had that a long time, but interestingly, Henry Nouwen spent time in the brain injured community.
Absolutely.
Which the light went on for me, like, this guy gets it because he saw
Totally.
what was there.
And
in
actually, if
these
you want to
people.
read a book by Nouwen about the brain injured community, which he lived with the last 10 years or so of his life, and he said he found his true calling when he did that. He taught at Yale
Isn't
with the
that
brightest, and then he was with the L'Arche community in Canada, which is brain injured people, and so with the people who with the least cognitive abilities. Well, he was with the ones with the most and ones with the least, and he loved that. And he wrote a book called In the Name of Jesus. That's
yeah.
more about that.
Yes.
That's it's just a little tiny thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah. So powerful.
I've seen that. We've learned, we could talk about this for the whole program, but what we've learned from Ella Claire, or this profoundly brain injured daughter, just the little things. And I think it's probably what he experienced. We've now been doing this for 20 years with Ella Claire. But, Nolan, who's over here, the great Nolan Anderson. So before I come out here, Ella Claire comes over, and because Nolan went inside to get you a coffee mug and a T-shirt, and so Ella Claire got to see Nolan. And so when I come in, she comes over and she says, "Dad, I got to see Nolan. I just really like him."
See, that's a Christ-like spirit.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't tend to think of God really liking us.
Yes.
We can think of him loving us maybe because we go, well, he's a God of love and all that. He actually likes us. Or as Brendan Manning used to say, the Father is very fond of me.
Right. Yes.
Wouldn't you like to have your own real father be very fond of you? Some of us had fathers who were. I did. Some of us had fathers who weren't. Painful.
Yeah.
Some of us had mothers who weren't fond of us. It's not only the father. In fact, the psychologists, I just was talking to somebody just the other day who's an expert, and they said actually a wound from a mother is maybe the most difficult one to get over. Because we all want to know that the father and the mother are fond of us.
And that's life. That's unlocks the doors.
That's it. And so Ella was showing a Christ-like spirit, which I've wondered, we'll find out in the next journey past this planet, which I'm probably going to get to before you. Well, I wonder if the reason we have people who have cognition problems or developmental disabilities is to teach us the beauty
Yes.
of.
I would argue yes.
Yes.
As a
Okay.
father of one for.
Well, and you would know. Well, you have the right to argue for it. I've not experienced it like that, but every parent I've talked to who's had a child with this kind of struggle, who grows into an adult sometimes, like Kenny Henson was brain injured, and Um, he was Down syndrome and lived to be about, I think, almost 60. He and I were close to the same age, and he had this Christ-like spirit, total simplicity,
Right.
total honesty.
Right.
Like when I'd be preaching, Kenny would be sitting in the front row with his parents. You know, he's my age. I'm like the age you were. I'm preaching away, and he'd just keep going like this. You know?
Wrap it up.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And he'd run up after I finished my sermon. Every time he'd run up, fully grown man, and he'd call my name out in a loud voice, Bart, Bart. And he'd run up and he'd wrap his arms around me, he'd put his head up against, and you know, and he'd hold me like too long, you know, for
Right.
you know, kind of the courtesies of our culture,
Right.
you know. And then he'd stop and he'd point again to his watch. And it was partly that he loved his watch.
Right. There is a simplicity. I think oftentimes there's a purity that I've seen that, and with Ella Claire, the main thing is the main thing. Like when she wakes up in the morning, she says it every day. When I saw her this morning, I walked by, hola, and she prefers Spanish. She'd like the whole world to speak Spanish.
Awesome.
But I say hola, and she says, Dad, I'm just so glad we get to be together.
Gosh.
That's what she's excited about for the day. I'm running around trying to figure out what my day, you know, and she's just like, I'm just so glad we get to be together. And I'm like, and she's been saying that for
Every day.
years and years and years.
That's a message from beyond.
Right, it's almost like God's going to have her say that till I get it. Like maybe, I don't know how long, but it's going to be a long time. But it's amazing and certain things like that she'll say. So anyway, I don't know how we got on special needs, brain injured, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Great.
One of the things that I've learned doing this, and we're talking with some amazing people in all walks of life, and you're number 137.
Awesome. Awesome.
And they have been, it's been an amazing thing. But one of the things we've been focused on is what we dwell on. You know, we call it the good life, or good life, not because it's this glossy, you know, nice cars, not that good life, but real good life. And goodness, the goodness of God is something that I've been thinking a lot about, that he's good. Because in this world, this craziness and this difficulty of planet Earth, I think it can be easy to forget that or not pay attention to that. And now that we've started this, I see good everywhere in the Bible. This morning, Titus 1:8, it's talking about like qualification for elders, and it was talking about one that loves the good. And I'm seeing it now.
Beautiful.
As this happens with stuff like this. But in your 72 years, and you've been a pastor, you've been with people in a lot of you've counseled, you've been all over the world, you've been to reconciliation meetings, you've seen a lot. Probably more than the average person in terms of the reality of the human experience, the painful divorces, difficult, premature death, all that comes with being a pastor and a counselor. After seeing all that and living the life you've led, what is your take now on the goodness of God? I'm making a lot of easy ones, aren't I?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, the
Who was
old
Jesus?
soft pitch.
Here's a softball.
There you go. Yeah. Not even a problem. Well, it kind of comes full circle for me. The goodness of God at the personal level for me is seen in Jesus. So it's kind of what we've been talking about. If you want to see the goodness of God, look at the goodness of Jesus. It's a little hard for me to get my head around the goodness of God because God is invisible. Like the passage I talked about in Colossians, 1st chapter, 15th verse. Now Christ is the visible expression of the invisible God. You want to know what the invisible God looks like? Look at Jesus, the Christ. And so that goodness always welcomes. That's one thing about goodness. It's always welcoming. There's a wonderful poem by Rumi, who's a Sufi mystic from the Islamic tradition in Turkey, one of my favorite poets. two Sufis are my favorite poets, Hafiz from Persia or Iran, and Rumi. And there's a poem, I can't quote it, but by him called The Guest House. And he says basically this, every human being is like a guest house, and every morning some new guests arrive. And some of them, you kind of almost wish they hadn't come, you know. But he says, welcome them all in laughing. Even if they come in and sweep away all your furniture in a violent storm, welcome them because they may be clearing you out for a new delight. So sometimes people say, I can't believe in God because my daughter has cancer. And you said, as a pastor, I'm in these situations. I'm in them a lot. I have been in them a lot. And they say, well, I can't believe in a God that allows this sort of thing, or like a brain injury. And number one, none of us get that fully, so I'm not pretending to get it. But maybe one little piece of the goodness of God is when something comes into our lives that seems to disrupt them, turn them upside down, inside out. It may be that this divine presence is clearing some stuff out of your life for a new delight. The theologian Thomas Merton, mystic and theologian, called it the true self. So his theory was, Dean, you have a false self and a true self. And the true self is yourself in Christ, yourself in God, yourself in love. But there's this other kind of poser one that we all have. I'm not picking on you. We all create a self that's, as one author puts it, a paste-up job. And it's a paste-up from the pain of our past, some of our ingrown personality traits, our culture, our religion, the neighborhood we grew up in. That self has got to fade away. And sometimes it takes pain, even tragedy, to clear the house out, to clear myself out. I just got a letter today from a person who went through a horrendous 5 years. And he's now out the other side of it. And he's in touch with his true self. And it's really quite beautiful. And I've been walking with him for 5 years through this difficult time. And I feel like there's a breakthrough finally. But it took a lot of clearing. Now that doesn't answer the problem of evil. I don't have the answer. But I just believe there's a good God behind everything. I do think nature shows us some of that. Now, nature can also be pretty rough character too. But, you know, I'm an artist and I paint landscapes. And I mean, you just can't. It's unbelievable. Like people say, oh, look at that tree, it's green. Take another look. Those leaves are like 20 different shades of green, green, yellow, orange, a little violet in them, some cadmium orange, you know. Take another look. And that's not even looking at them under a microscope or something cool like that.
So you've really learned this in some of your art.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It makes you more observant. Art makes you more observant.
You
don't have to be an artist, but I'd say go enjoy art. I mean, I'm late to the party, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, with the Ella Claire experience in our life, just that's true what you just said about the clearing. You know, I had somebody tell me early on, you know, in about 10 years you might be able to make some sense out of this, and that really happened for us. It took a long time, but and then I started to realize who it was that needed the healing. You know, we were over there praying for healing all day long.
Brain. It was your heart.
It turns out, turns out she wasn't the one in the need of healing.
That's that made my day. That is a great insight. And I see that in people. My good friend in Phoenix, Rick, they had a brain injured child who finally passed away, sadly, at about age 38. And he was the same age as my son and had the same name, Jason. And I watched his parents grieve his death. Tragic. I mean, it was horrible for them for years. And these are people with deep faith and maybe some of the most well-balanced people psychologically I've ever met. And yet you, from the outside, you think, yeah, but now there's a little bit of relief, isn't there? No, because their son Jason was the Christ figure in their life. He was healing them, like you just said so beautifully. And for those of us who haven't had that experience, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
We see the struggle and the difficulties, which are true too.
Right.
But we don't see as much, at least, the other things. So that's a great insight. now you know who needed the healing. You're over praying for her. And God is up there going, you're missing the point. Yeah.
Right. And these things take a long time. You know, that's the other thing
Slow work of God.
The slow work of God, that's interesting. The slow work of God. He is not in a hurry.
I met a guy at a Salvation Army retreat. And for a number of years, I did a lot with the 12-step community and healing, alcoholics and stuff like this. And I loved speaking at Salvation Army because there was every race. They happened to be all men in the situations I was in, but they were coming out of recovery centers. And then some were just coming out of their churches. They were just folks who were running businesses and things. And you got these tattooed guys coming out of prison and everything else. And this one Salvation Army officer was sitting next to me, and he was huge, African-American man. And I'm small, I don't know if you can tell on the screen here, but so this guy's shoulders were literally up here. And he had on his uniform, so he was one of the people in charge. And I'll call him George, and I said, well, George, tell me your story. The story was horrendous, every crime known to humankind. And in and out of prisons, and 9 different prisons. And then he had this mystical experience that changed his life. Now he's helping people. And I'm sitting there, this guy's huge. and I'm like this little white middle-class guy who's never been to prison. And I said, George, I'm a little afraid to ask you this question, but he says, no, ask me anything. I said, why 9 prisons? Why did it take 9? Why not 4?
Right.
And he started laughing. And he said, I've been wondering that same thing for years. He says, and then he got calm and he just said, thoughtful, reflective, and he said, I guess in my case, it just took 9.
Mm-hmm.
That was a beautiful statement.
Yeah.
God is not in a hurry. God is not in a hurry. You can fight God all the way if you want to, and we all do at times.
Yeah.
And some fight him right up to death. Some maybe even through death.
Mm-hmm.
But God is always patient, kind. That doesn't mean that he won't bring things into your life to get you to think.
Yeah.
He will.
True. And those 12-step AA meetings, I think, can be the closest thing to church that there is.
Oh, not even, there's no comparison.
It's unbelievable.
No, because churches, sadly, I run one, but churches, sadly, are a dangerous place to hear a safe message often.
Right.
It's kind of dangerous to be who you really are. People judge you, and the message is pretty milquetoast. But at Salvation Army or in a 12-step deal, it's just the opposite. It's a safe place to hear a dangerous message.
Yeah, right.
The dangerous message is you're loved by God. You can change. You can totally change.
Right.
You're his beloved.
Right.
But it's safe to say, yeah, but I just went out and got blitzed last night.
Right.
Nobody goes, oh my gosh, you did? No.
How dare you?
How dare you?
Right.
No.
Right.
In fact, here's a funny story I heard from Jim Finley. He was a psychologist and he was training, and he was working with 12-step groups in his training. He later became a very famous trauma therapist and now contemplative teacher. But he said he went to this first AA meeting just to observe, and there's like 20 people around, and a new guy comes in, and they'll go, "Okay, George, tell us what you love the most." And the guy says, "Well, my wife." And all 20 people said, "Bullshit!" And the guy was kind of shaken up, like, and they said, "What do you love the most?" And he said, "God." They all went, "Bullshit!" And he's really shaken up. And this goes like 4 questions, and finally they go, "What do you love the most, George?" He goes, "Alcohol." And they go,
Yeah. Right.
"Welcome,
Right,
welcome,
right.
welcome." Truth,
Right.
honesty.
Right.
He
And
needed to get to
right.
that point.
Truth, grace.
There was total grace.
Nobody's above
He got
anybody.
applause when
Right.
he said what was
Right.
true.
The real answer.
Yeah, the real answer.
Right. That's funny.
And the church is supposed to be that, and sadly, often is not. Maybe most of the time, actually, is not. And that's.
We're already out of time. I had about 4 other questions on my mind, but we covered a,
Okay,
we covered a lot
few
of ground.
things. Yeah.
Bart, thank you.
My pleasure.
It's great to be
My
with you.
pleasure. Good to be back.
We'll see you next time.